यज्ञपतये दैवी स्वस्तिरस्तु नः स्वस्तिर्मानुषेभ्यः ऊर्ध्वम् जिगातु भेषजम् शन्नो अस्तु द्विपदे शञ्चतुष्पदे ॐ शान्तिः 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 सहस्रशीर्षा पुरुषः सहस्राक्षः सहस्रपात् स भूमिम् विश्वतो वृत्वा अत्यतिष्ठद्दशाङ्गुलम् पुरुष एवेदगम् सर्वम् यद्भूतम् यच्च भूयम् उतामृतत्वस्येषा नः यदन्नेनातिरोहति एतावानस्य महिमा अतो ज्यायागिश्च पूरुषः पादोऽस्य विश्वाभूतानि त्रिपादस्यामृतम् दिवि त्रिपादोर्ध्व उदैत्पुरुषः पादोऽस्येहा भवात् पुनः ततो विश्वम् व्यक्रामत् शासनानशने अभि तस्माद्विराडजायत विराजो अधिपूरुषः स जातो अत्यरिच्यत पश्चाद्भूमिमथो पुरः यत्पुरुषेण हविषा देवा यज्ञमतन्वत वसन्तो अस्यासीदाज्यम् ग्रीष्म इद्मः शरद्धभिः सप्तास्यासन् परिधजः त्रिः सप्त समिधः कृताः देवायज्ञम् तन्वानाः अबध्नन् पुरुषम् पशुम् तम् यज्ञम् बर्हिषि प्रोक्षन् पुरुषम् जातमग्रतः तेन देवा अयजन्त साध्या ऋषयश्चजे तस्माद्यज्ञात् सर्वहुतः सम्भृतम् वृषदाज्यम् पशोगस्तागिश्चक्रे वायम्यान् आरण्यान् ग्राम्याश्चजे तस्माद्यज्ञात् सर्वहुतः ऋचः सामानि जज्ञिरे छन्दागुंसि जज्ञिरे तस्मात् यजुस्तस्मादजायत तस्मादश्वा अजायन्त ये केचोभजादतः गावो जज्ञिरे तस्मात् तस्माज्जाता अजावजः यत्पुरुषम् व्यदधुः कतिधा व्यकल्पयन् मुखम् किमस्य कौ बाहू कावूरूपादावुच्येते ब्राह्मणोऽस्य मुखमासीत् बाहूराजन्यः कृतः ऊरू तदस्य जद्वैश्यः पद्भ्यागम् शूद्रो अजायत चन्द्रमा मनसो जातः चक्षोः सूर्यो अजागत मुखादिन्द्रश्चाग्निश्च प्राणात् वायुरजायत नाभ्या आसीदन्तरिक्षम् शीर्ष्णोद्यौः समवर्तत पद्भ्याम् भूभिर्दिशः श्रोत्रात् तथा लोकागम् अकल्पयन् वेदाहमेतम् पुरुषम् महान्तम् आदित्यवर्णम् तमसस्तु पारे सर्वाणि रूपाणि विचित्य धीरः नामानि कृत्वाभिवदन् यदास्ते धाता पुरस्ताद्यमुदा जहार चक्रः प्रविद्वान् प्रदिशश्च तस्रः तमेवम् विद्वानमृत इह भवति नान्यः पन्था अयनाय विद्यते यज्ञेन यज्ञमयजन्त देवाः यानि धर्माणि प्रथमान्यासन् ते हनाकं महिमानः सचन्ते यत्र पूर्वे साध्याः सन्ति देवाः अभ्यः सम्भूतः पृथिव्यैरसाच्च विश्वकर्मणः समवर्तताधि तस्य त्वष्टा विदधद्रूपमेति तत्पुरुषस्य विश्वमाजानमग्रे वेदाहमेतं पुरुषं महान्तम् आदित्यवर्णं तमसः परस्तात् तमेवं विद्वानमृत इह भवति नान्यः पन्था विद्यते जनाय प्रजापतिश्चरति गर्भे अन्तः अजायमानो बहुधा विजायते तस्य धीराः परिजानन्ति योनिम् मरीचीनां पदमिच्छन्ति वेधसः यो देवेभ्य आतपति यो देवानां पुरोहितः पूर्वो यो देवेभ्यो जातः नमो रुचाय ब्राह्मये रुचं ब्राह्मं जनयन्तः देवा अग्रे तदब्रुवन् यस्त्वैवं ब्राह्मणो विद्यात् तस्य देवा असन्वशे ह्रीश्च ते लक्ष्मीश्च पत्न्यौ अहोरात्रे पार्श्वे नक्षत्राणि रूपम् अश्विनं व्यात्तम् इष्टं मनिषाण अमुं मनिषाण सर्वं मनिषाण ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः
Namaste. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So last week we had just about finished this mantra number 8, which said Tasmad Ashva Ajayanta Yekecho Bhayadataha Gavoha Jaggire Tasmad Jata Ajavayaha. This is the mantra. So just a quick revision. The purpose of this mantra is to detail the samagri for the life's yajna. So the whole life is in the form of a yajna, and in fact better than that, in the form of a homa, as we had seen before. So homa means that a gradual process of providing a sacrifice to a devata, a chosen devata. And so here, as we will see, the yajna is a Purusha, which is a limited Purusha, like you and I, providing a yajna to the unlimited Purusha. This is the allegory, and this is how the whole thing proceeds. So in that yajna, homa of the life, all of the samagri means all of the wherewithals, all of the instruments, all of the segments of the yajna have to be presented. And so here in this verse that we did last week, Before that, it was the instructions on how to do the yajna. So that's how it was. Tasmat yagyat sarvahutaha richas samani jaggire chanda gumsi jaggire tasmat yajus tasmad ajayata. So there, the instruction book, because as we saw before, that to hand over the action to those constituents who don't know how to use it without an instruction book leads to confusion and possibly a lot of problems. It's like giving, some computer to a child that doesn't know how to protect against people that are harmful to them. So the instructions on using the computer must be given, laptops to the children. So similarly here, the Vedas are the instruction books for human beings to perform the homa in the correct way. Then what we saw last week was that some samagri is given, and it's starting with Ashva Ajayanta, that all the samagri for a person to move from one place to the other rapidly is given. So the horses and elephants were the two main vehicles for moving rapidly. Well, not rapidly, but in the case of elephants, to negotiate difficult terrain in jungles and so on and so forth. So that's all part of the samagri that is being given and so on. And there it says, the next verse of that mantra is Ye kecha ubhayatataha. And so here this is a introduction to the order of the universe, where the horse, which is not dependent on eating other living beings. In fact, it refuses. It refuses. In the case of a human being, we might start eating meat if we have no other way. But a horse would never even touch it. So the horse was designed to be a vegetarian animal. But then the order of the universe is that other animals have to be provided, have to be created that keep the balance of nature, and they have to eat other animals. And there is nothing wrong, nothing bad, nothing out of place. In fact, if you disturb the sequence of this, then you can create overabundance of certain populations, as we saw last week. And so ubhayataha means that it is both vegetarian and non-vegetarian animals as a samagri were also created. So there is no punya papa for animals. When you see a bear with a fish in eating a fish, this is the way it is supposed to be. And so this is how, so the ubhayataha means that either way it was created. And in fact, it's interesting that certain animals are born vegetarians and they will never eat meat, and certain animals can only eat meat. And I guess there are some that can eat either one of them. I remember a long time ago I had known this fact. I don't know if you know this or not, but apparently if you shine a light in darkness and you see some eyes, I can tell you, because when I was a youngster, my father was part of a friend circle in Bihar, and we would go into these jungles, and my father's friends were actually hunters. My father never hunted, but we just went along with them they said, come along, we'll show you deep-seated jungle animals and so on. And I remember this, that there were certain animals, in fact, I remember this well, in the darkness, we would go in a jeep, and then the driver would switch off the engine. It would be completely dark. We could see stars at night time, completely dark. And then slowly from around us, some animals will peek into us. And the way that we would see them is, in the darkness, their eyes will shine in a very subtle manner. You don't see the rest of the body, but you can see their eyes because it reflects some light, even the light of the sky. And this is the point I was making. I remember being taught that if the eyes, and especially if you were to shine a flashlight onto their eyes, those animals who are meat eating will appear red as a reflection, and those who are vegetarians will reflect either, I forget whether it's green or blue. Amazing. And so the meat eating animals are more aggressive. They're rajasic, and they have to pounce. Not easy to find a prey. And those who are not are docile and defensive and gentle, and become a victim to the red-eyed animals who are non-vegetarians. This whole structure is made by Ishvara, by Purusha. That's a very beautiful whole, their own structure of how the animals are, where they live, what are their capabilities, and so on and so forth. Okay, then we saw, which was undone, the next one is Gavoha Jaggire Tasmat. So let's spend some time talking about that. So what I had mentioned was that Swami Maheshananji, who is extremely well read and is very insightful, he really keeps out the deeper meaning of this. And you know, it is exactly like a person who has seen the entire structure of humanity. I was mentioning it to you that supposing you have an engineer who has essentially designed an entire car and knows the car inside out. Then if you walk up to that engineer and say, where does this screw go? He can immediately tell it is in one of those two places. You either go to that side of the car, and because he can remember the size of it and so on, or it can go there. That's it, those are the two places. So from overall macro view, you can really determine all the pieces as to how they fit into the whole. So similarly, Swami Maheshananji, I think, has in my experience, I've been reading him, cross-checking all the things with all the other things I read. Masterful. He is very well read, very well informed about the details, about where everything fits. So he pointed out a very interesting fact that I wasn't aware of. He says the Purusha Suktam uses the word jaggire very sparingly and very carefully. And otherwise it will say just ajayata. Ajayata means that it was brought into existence. It was created from jaya, from ja. So what is born is called ja. And so ajayata is a past tense of ja, means what was created. Jaggire is a special construction. Why? Because there is a dual meaning of the word jaggire. Jaggire means what was created, but it has a dual meaning. One meaning is the normal, that it was created. The other meaning is it is created so that it leaves a certain insight into what the creation really means. Jnana, knowledge, not just a creation, not just a straightforward, you see something that is created. I'll give you an example. So for instance, there are many medicinal trees, medicinal plants that are very important from a medical standpoint, at least in Ayurveda. I don't know about the Western medicine, but in Ayurveda and in Unani and perhaps even the Chinese system, there are special trees. So one is for example, neem tree. So the neem tree is what produces the substance called neem, which is very bitter, but it is extremely beneficial for sugar control and lots of other things also. It is highly recommended, even as an antiseptic and so on and so forth. You can boil it and put it on the skin. Extremely important tree. So here's the thing. This is all the explanation of the word jagire. So suppose you have a tree growing in your backyard, and it's a neem tree. Now you are seeing the tree, but you don't know it's a neem tree and what the medical benefits of this tree are. Until somebody might come to them and said, "My gosh, you have a neem tree." You said, "I do." It's just one of those trees that just gives shade, and it actually creates a lot of, I'm just making it up. It creates a lot of mess and I have to clean it and so on. He says, "Oh my God, you have no idea what this tree is. In fact, can I come regularly and get some branches from it?" So the person says, "Really? Is it that important?" "Oh, absolutely. Neem tree means it is a rare tree. How did you get it?" So to see it obviously is one thing. Everybody can see a tree. It's no big deal. But to know that the tree hides certain qualities is not easy to see until you are educated about it. So the word jagire is not just seeing things, but be informed about how important the creation is. And in fact, you can see in the case of Vedas, Richas Samani Jaggire Chanda Gumsi Jaggire Tasmat. And Yajus also, for that matter, maybe for meter purposes, it didn't continue on with Jaggire, it just said Ajayata. So all Vedas is like that. How? Because Vedas can look kind of nice to have an instruction on how to do karmas and so on and so forth. But Vedas contain the seed of Amritam, of immortality. If you just like the neem tree, if you understand the quality of this ordinary looking tree, you can be free of diseases. Similarly, the Vedas looks like a lot of words. In fact, in Mundaka Upanishad it says, Dve vidye veditavye aparacha paracha. Means, may you have the wisdom to understand that there are two kinds of knowledges. Dve vidye veditavye. May you understand two kinds of knowledges. One of them is paravidya and the other one is aparavidya. Paravidya means this is the final knowledge which frees you from all sense of limitation, which is what we want really. I mean, we don't know that vidya is what is needed, but we want to remove all sense of limitation. And the other one is aparavidya. Aparavidya means our normal vidya that we have. Any kind of ordinary knowledge about things is very helpful. You're well informed about medicines, about law, about politics. Helpful, no doubt about it. But is it the final word in knowledge? No. So similarly in Mundaka Upanishad it is said, all the Vedas Shabda Rashi all the words in the Vedas, millions of words, are part of the aparavidya, not paravidya. See, this is the point to understand. And the people, in fact, Adi Shankara in his commentary questions, how can you say that the Vedas are part of aparavidya? Isn't that paravidya? So he answers that doubt himself by saying, it can be both. If you don't understand, and in fact this is a topic we're going to go into, so I won't spend any more time on this, but just briefly revising this, Adi Shankara says, if you do not understand that Vedas are a springboard to freedom, then it is taken to be somewhat helpful, but not helpful to the point of gaining, immortality. And so, all I'm saying is that the word Jaggire is used for the Vedas, because the Vedas have both forms, Aparavidya and Paravidya. I'm giving you this big background. You know why? Now I want to comment on Gavo hi Jaggire Tasmat. And here Purusha Suktam uses the word Jaggire for Gavaha. Gavaha means cows. So here all kinds of animals are discussed as samagri, right? Ashva Ajayanta and Jekechu Abhayadataha, Abhayadataha means that all kinds of animals are included. There are vegetarian, non-vegetarian, either one of them. Then the cow, and then later on it would say Tasmat Jata Ajavayaha. Aja and Avi. So that will come in a minute. But let's now talk about cows. And for cows, in this entire mantra, Purusha Suktam uses the word Jaggire. This is the significance. So what does that mean? It means when you look at this four-legged animal called cow in English and Gao in Sanskritam, then you can tell who derived which word from whom, who came first. I don't know what the origin of English is, but the Sanskritam is Deva Bhasha. It is there from the very beginning of the creation. And I'm happy that English also adopts some portions of that. So cow. So when you see a cow, it is just looking like a tree that you don't know how important that is. And so Jaggire means that the Aparavidya is obvious, the Paravidya is not obvious. What is the Paravidya of Gao? This is a very special animal. Apart from the entire animal kingdom. This is why it is specially mentioned here. Gavo hi Jaggire Tasmat means that Ishvara in his wisdom created a second mother for you. This is what a cow is. If there can be a mother in the form of a dear animal, it would be a cow. Is it just idle thing? No. Because it is said that Swami Maheshananji actually goes into considerable detail on this, so I won't go into all of that, but I'll just summarize some of the points. So he says that if you look at the human body, what you find is that the maximum growth of the human body occurs in the first year. You double your weight in 1 year. And that never happens after that. It slows down. That curve is kind of like this. And the growth of the first year depends upon milk. And preferably mother's breastfed milk. There is nothing like that. And in fact, it is so nutritious for the baby. It's easily digestible. It gives you all the vitamins, proteins, whatever you want. Whatever is needed for the baby to grow, it is there. No solid food. This is what it is. If for some reason the mother cannot breastfeed the child, then the cow's milk is recommended. Not buffalo milk, not goat milk, not anything else, but cow's milk. Why? Because the constituents of a cow's milk are very much like the mother's milk. And in fact, Swami Maheshananji says that if you look at where did I wrote this down? Yeah. So this I'm just going to give you a composite aspect of this. So what you find is that any food that you intake has two portions primarily. It has more than that, but two portions. One is the subtle portion which is born from sattva guna. And this subtle portion which says snayu mandalam, it makes the snayu mandalam of the body healthy. Snayu mandalam means the entire nervous system. Because our body has both snayu mandalam and mansa mandalam. Mansa mandalam means flesh, skin, bones, hard stuff, easily identifiable. And snayu mandalam means the subtle aspects of nerves and the blood flow and so on, the heart. There's so many things. And so it is clearly divided in between both of them. And both are needed. Both are needed. But the mamsam, the gross aspect of that, it comes from tamoguna. And that means, for example, weight gain, healthy bone structure. And it goes towards the improvement of the body. The snayu mandalam goes towards the health of the mind, health of one's self-adjustment, lack of any problems, and it also is inside the mamsa mandalam. And they say that the milk is primarily for snayu mandalam. Snayu mandalam. Later on, as the baby becomes a child and then grows into bigger things, you do not need as much milk. And you can just now do with other substituted foods. But in the beginning, the most important aspects of the growth, it comes from milk. And the milk of a cow is the most important one. And in fact, this is why it is called, in India we used to call it Gai Mata, the mother cow. And very gentle, giving. If you look at a cow, there's a couple of things about that. One is that the cow does not want to be alone. cannot thrive by being alone. It depends upon the human being. And so it's a symbiotic relationship. The human being and the cow live together. One helps the other. And just like a mother, and you know, the average life of a cow is about 15 to 20 years, and most of the time it is actually milk producing. Towards the latter part of its life, it cannot produce milk. Now, Swamiji says, if your mother is no longer helpful to you, will you slaughter your mother? Unthinkable. But we do to the cow. Very recently, I tell you, I have become sensitized to why there are vegans. I didn't quite understand, because I've been a vegetarian now for the last 40 years, and I would not think about harming and killing an animal, let alone a cow. Cannot even think of it. So eating beef, etc., once I understood the whole thing, was out of my system. But I felt that I can have milk, I can have cheese, milk products, yogurt. I am not killing a cow for that, because recently it was pointed out to me, I tell you, after a long time it became sensitive to me, that there is a difference between cows in the US and Western countries and in India. So in India, cows are generally not slaughtered. I say generally, I don't know what the facts are. Yeah, there are non-Hindus that continue to slaughter the cow, but Hindus, generally speaking, will let the cows die a natural death. They are a nuisance. They are moving around in the road, oblivious to traffic and all that, but that's all part of life. Because it was considered to be the most important supporting animal in the life of a human being. As I said, it was like a mother. So this is the very reason for the expression, the sacred cow. People do not understand it. They make fun of us Hindus. Sacred cow. What are you talking about? This is the insight that we are encouraged to have, and this is the reason for the word Jaggire. So I didn't finish my thought. In India, they don't slaughter. And so for that reason, it is okay not to be a vegan. See, follow this argument. I have become recently very sensitive to the fact that the reason that there are vegans in this country and in other Western world is because by giving milk and curd, yogurt and ghee and others, you have to have cows and then you slaughter them. So in a way, a vegetarian who is a non-vegan is contributing to the death of the cows. This has greatly upset me, honestly. I still have not completely changed my ways, but I am struggling to find out how I can do that. So there's a big difference between veganism here versus in India. Anyway, now I'm drawing this conclusion to a close. Purusha Suktam says this is a very special animal created by God, by Ishvara. View it, and certainly we should not eat the meat of the cow. I would, in fact, I'm going to start a text after the Mandukya Karika is over. In fact, that reminds me, I just want to mention that to you. In fact, I'm going to send you an email on that. that the morning advanced class, which is the Mandukya Upanishad and Gaudapadaji's Karika, is now finished. We just finished it last week. And what I want to do is to go over, this has been going on for a couple of years, go over that in a very abridged fashion, bringing out the main concepts of it. Not really going through all the shlokas and mantras and so on, but just to do that in a highly condensed way. And so I'll start that next week. And if those of you would like to listen to it, then you can do so. I think I'll ask Raj to have a separate folder, and then you can just look at it you can listen to it and watch it on your own. You don't have to do that on live. So I just want to mention that. So now after that text the revision is over, I'm going to start an advanced text which is called Brahma Sutra. And as qualifications to be studying Brahma Sutra, I am toying with the idea of making sure that only vegetarians are students of that course. And I may not go to that extent, but I would highly recommend to you that if you want to study that, then please, at least for the time that you are studying, do not eat meat, and definitely not cow's meat. So with that, I will finish this. Finish this treatment of Gavo hi jaggire tasmat. Okay, then let's go to the next section, which is Tasmat Jata Ajavayaha. And with that, our mantra will be finished, will be complete, and hopefully we'll go to the next one even today itself. So he says that after he's describing the entire samagri. Ajayant, Ashva Ajayanta Yekecha Ubhayatataha Gavoha Jaggire, then Tasmat Jata Ajavayaha. So Ajavayaha means Aja. Aja means a goat. G-O-A-T, goat. And Avi means sheep. So again, what I mentioned was that it's not like you are naming every one of the animals. It does a representative sampling of that. And so what the samples of this is, domesticated animals. Ajavayaha means the entire spectrum of domesticated animals. You can just look at the whole thing. Even dogs and cats and sheep and goats and all those kinds of things, hen and everything is the meaning of that. So you have a paraphernalia that you surround yourself with. So you can have 5 goats and 5 sheep to take care of you. This is all besides the important animal called the cow. Because in those days, the cow wealth was considered to be very wealthy. If you had 4 or 5 cows, you were considered to be very wealthy in a village. And people protected it, they took care of it and all that. But in addition to that, you have a lot of domesticated animals that are scurrying around and you're taking care of them and so on. And you lead your life surrounded by these domesticated animals. You do something with it and so on and so forth. You lead your life with it. So here Swami Maheshananji gave a very interesting story. Okay? So I'll complete that story, and that will give you an idea of what the limitations and potential of the domesticated animals are into this story. Beautiful story. So he says that there was a very poor man, and he was not very well read. He didn't have any skills. He didn't have a farm. He didn't own any land. He didn't do that. So everybody has to make some kind of a living. So what he did was he had a retinue of 5 goats and 5 sheep. And he would go from village to village, from house to house, and put up a show. And he learned how to make the animals dance. He himself, he would dance to a tune. And then he would have a damaru. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. The damaru makes this sound on the stretched form of the two sides, and that it makes that sound called damaru. And so he would go there and provide some entertainment to people, and everybody would just give him some coins, and by that poor guy lived all his life, and so on and so forth. Very minimal subsistence. But he didn't know what else to do. So one day he was crossing the forest from one village to the other, and he was pretty tired, so he sat down near a tree, under a tree, and what he saw was that there was a Swami, a Mahatma, who was just sitting there with his eyes closed and doing meditation. So he sat next to him and so on. So this Mahatma asked him, "Well, what do you do? You have all these animals along with it and so on." So he says, "Sir, my life is I make them dance to my tune and I just somehow subsist and so on. So I do a little bit of a show. And then I collect some money and so on and so forth." So the sadhu said, "Well, can you do one for me?" So this fellow thought, this is a Swami, a sadhu sitting there. He's not going to have any money. And I'm going to be doing this. I'm already tired and I have to do this show for someone who really is not rewarding me. But he said, you know what, he looks like an important person, who knows. So he did this show for him. And the Swami was very happy with him. He clapped his hand. He says, "Shabash, very good, excellent. What a show you did." He says, "Now can I show you my show?" So this person said, "Your show? What are you going to do for me?" So he says, "Okay, do this. Here is a requirement for seeing my show. You close your eyes for 15 minutes. And here's the condition, do not open your eyes, because then the show will get interrupted and it will not be effective. So you have to close your eyes for 15 minutes. So this fellow was sitting there and he told his animals, just sit there and don't disturb anyone. And he closed his eyes just like the Mahatma told him. And he sat there with some difficulty, because he's not used to keeping his eyes closed for that long. Pretty soon the guy is so tired that he fell asleep. So when he opened his eyes from sleep, he saw that the Mahatma was gone and his animals also had disappeared. His own domesticated animals had disappeared. He says, "Oh my God, this was not an ordinary Mahatma. This was a thief in the form of a Mahatma. My daily subsistence is also gone. My animals are also gone. What am I going to do?" So he put his hands in front of his face and he was just deep in depression. Just then, two hefty men mounting a horse, or two horses each, one horse each, they came and they said, "Get up." So he says, "Oh my God, who are these people?" And they had swords and they were well appointed and so on and so forth. So he stood up and they said, "Sir, you are our new king." He says, "What? What are you talking about?" He says, "Sir, here's the thing. Our king has died. We have a huge kingdom on the other side of this forest, and our king recently died, and here is the rule. Two of us have been set in a random direction, and whoever we find that the very first one becomes our king." He could not believe such a cockamamie story. But he had nothing else to do, so he says, so the person said, "Climb in behind me." So he climbed in, he went to the city, and everybody was welcoming him. His clothes got changed, and he was ensconced in a palace, and they were all concubines and wives, and all these courtiers, they all, and he had a wonderful existence. He says, "Oh my God, what a life. I cannot believe this. This is all providence. I don't know how it happened." And so he just started enjoying his life as a king. Then, as it happens, the kingdom is always in jeopardy of being run over by the neighborly kings. Always happens. So you have to really maintain your control over your own kingdom. This fellow had never really understood how to be a strong leader. He was not a strong leader, he was just some kind of an ordinary person. So the word spread that this is not a very strong king. And this word got on to his neighbor's king. And all the subjects of the neighbor king said, "Sir, I think we should invade this guy because I understand that he doesn't know anything about fighting and his people are going to be in disarray. It'll be an easy thing for you to go and take over this." So they started to amass their forces, and this fellow was saying, "No, not me, I cannot fight." So they all said, "Sir, you have to fight. This is part of your duty. You have to do that." So he said, "Oh my God, my days are numbered. I can't even defend myself, let alone the kingdom. And it was good days, and now I'm just going to die again." So he started to go. He had to cross the forest. When he was crossing the forest, he saw the same Mahatma sitting under the same tree, doing the same meditation. So he quickly went down from his horse and said, "Sir, I am, you remember me?" So the sadhu said, "I remember you very well." So he said, "Sir, I am in big trouble. I am going to die because I don't know how to fight. I don't know how to fight. What am I supposed to do?" So the sadhu said, "Okay, I'll help you. Do this. Sit there quietly with your eyes closed for 15 minutes. Don't open them until I tell you." Same thing happened. He closed his eyes and he was so tired he fell asleep. And when he got up, his horses were gone. The sadhu was still there, and his animals came back, and all of his torn clothes came back to his body. It was as though exactly he had just met the sadhu for the first time. And then he realized what had happened. He said, "Oh my God, I cannot believe that through the sheer magic of this person, I was given such a good life. Never did I think about him even once. Never did I try to find him. Never did I try to thank him. Never did I try to I was just enjoying my life. And I really deserve this. So the sadhu said, lead your life and think about it, and you have some ways to go, but just be yourself, inquire within yourself, and all these animals and so on, they are very ephemeral. They really will not really help you very much, but in the meantime you have nothing else to do. This is what you've got to do. This is the story. Sorry, long story. It has an applicability. The applicability is you and I. Exactly a human being. And this is the yajna. This is the homa that we have to think about. So what happens is that we are surrounded by these domestic animals. And domestic animals means you have a certain life around you, your friends. And not only that, but Swami Maheshananji says the 5 sheep and the 5 goats can be likened to your 5 sense organs and the 5 actions of organs of action. They're all dancing and they are preoccupying you. You are completely taken up with them. You are just busy doing this, looking at here, right? I want to get that. And then some friends call, and this is your life. And in the meantime, there are calls for, is this all there is? And some teacher comes along and says, no, you have a much better life. If you look into deep within yourself, you will find that all of these are not necessary. They really don't really define your life. They are just keeping you preoccupied for nothing. You're not gaining anything from it. It's a miserable existence. And think about yourself as a independent person who you're okay with them, but also not really needed. They're not needed by you. And so there is a vision that comes in. It's like closing your eyes and the Mahatma gives you this vision. And you feel happy about it for a while. And yet, you get lost in the whole process. You don't really follow the advice of the teachers and so on. You're still too busy. You're just saying, I don't know, maybe later, not right now. You go back to the same state. You're no better than that. And death approaches, and a next village comes in. And Swami Maheshani makes this point. He says, going from one life to the other, you think things will change? No. Some of the things may be slightly different. Every village has its own population. Some people might welcome you better. Some people might reject you. But you are still only going to get pennies out of it. What are you going to do? Isn't it time that you looked at Mahatmas that say, this is not your life? Purusha, there is something much more important to do. And you say, how? Can you teach me? This is where the yajna comes in. The offering in a sacrifice comes in, and he says, yes, You do this yajna and you will be free from this miserable existence that you find yourself in. And the worst part is, even though it is miserable, you don't think it's miserable. You're happy with it. These dancing things and so on, you're preoccupied. But when you come to think about it, this is a miserable existence. You are qualified for much better. So, this is the significance of Tasmad Jata Ajavayaha. Means this literally useless coterie of things that you surround yourself with. And you are happy with it. I find, really, I observe people with dogs. It's just amazing. Instead of just inquiring about the important things with your life, just as an example, you adopt a dog. You get a dog, cats, and you're busy with them. They come and wag their tail and you feel happy. There's somebody who cares about me. And you begin to understand how loving they are. This is how you spend your life, amongst cats and dogs and surrounding things and so on. And in order to really inquire about the reality of who you are and so on and so forth, do not forget the words of the Mahatma, the words of Purusha Suktam. So that's the significance of the last portion of this mantra, Tasmad Jata Ajavaya. So I think we are now done with that. So now let us proceed to the next mantra. I'll very briefly mention that today, and we will. This is a mantra which is going to take a while. Swami Maheshananji has gone crazy discussing this over so many pages with so much insight into it that it'll take me, and I'll do my best to abridge it so that we don't really go on and on. You remember the mantra which said Tasmad Virad Jayata Virajo Adi Purusha Sajato Attirichyata. How long it took. This has the same potential. This is going to go through 100 pages of his commentary. But I think I'll try to summarize it for you. Anyway, this is the mantra. So he says, this is, and then as I mentioned to you, he has his own sequence of how this follows. Sometimes the way we read the Yajurveda mantras, it doesn't follow the same sequence. And I don't question it. I'm just following his lead. And I figured that he has a certain sense of which comes first. So I'm just going to follow him. So with that, the mantra is Tam yagyam barhishi praukshan purushan jatamagrataha tena deva ayajanta sadhya rishayascha ye. This is the mantra. And it was so interesting. I was trying to see the meaning of these words through various sources. Not recently. When I first started this course, I went into the internet to see how people translate this, and it is so amazing. It is so different from what Swami Maheshananji has pointed out that I don't know what to say. So obtuse, non-understandable. And even Swami Maheshananji's interpretation in the beginning is very difficult to see. But we will put it together so in the end it all fits together into an understandable mantra. And I would say this. So this is going to be the subject of this mantra. Again, I'll just repeat it before I tell you what I was going to start. Tam yagyam barhishi praukshanna purusham jatamagratah tena devaha ayajanta sadhya rishayascha ye. So I would say this, that here the Purusha Suktam mantra can be taken as highlighting the two portions of the Vedas, sometimes three portions. So this is Karma Kanda, Upasana Kanda and Jnana Kanda. So the one dealing with karma, one dealing with prayers, and the third one dealing with knowledge. As you know, we've talked about it and you already may know that. So the Purusha Suktam can be viewed as belonging to the Karma Kanda. And this is not a surprise if you go to any of the temples by people who are very devoted to the Vedic rituals. Then Rudram and Purusha Suktam is invariably chanted, as we have discussed it before. You must have experienced this. So the feeling is that this is part of Karma Kanda, because the people who go to temples and don't really bother about the meaning of these, they just want to chant it and hopefully they will get some punya from it, are all Karma Kandis. So the feeling is that because Purusha Suktam is also part of the regular rituals, all the Pandits know it, all the Pujaris know it very well, a lot of the people who are close to the temple, they all know it very well, then it must be part of the Karma Kanda. Swami Maheshanji says, I have a surprise for you. No. It really is part of Jnana Kanda. It may be okay to chant it any time. It's not as though you cannot chant it, this is ours, nothing like that. But the understanding of Purusha Suktam is Vedanta. And for that reason, the word Jaggire associated with Richaha, Samani, Chandamsi, etc. should be understood. That even though those are Shabdarashi, but you have to really understand the importance of how they are freeing you from any kind of limitations, which is Vedanta. Swamiji says that Swami Maheshananji says that Purusha Suktam is really Vedanta in disguise. And he is now uncovering the disguise, which takes a while. Just like the insights into Ye Kecho, Bhayatataha, Gavoha Jaggire, Samani, all the other things that we have said, Aranya, Gramyas, all of that. Not an ordinary thing, but some insight behind it. And it all makes sense in the end because they are all tied together with a vision which is unifying. So that is the meaning that even this mantra we are going to embark on from next week on, and it will take a while. I don't know how many classes, but it won't be as simple as Ashwa Ajayanta Gavoha Jaggire. It's something more meaningful. And what is the Purusham, what is the Yagyam, what is Parihishi, what is Praukshan, and Sadhya, Rishayascha Ye, how are they all connected? And above all, what does it mean for me in my life? What should I do? Why is it important for me? Is the looking of the meaning behind it, that I am very fortunate to be following Swami Maheshananji's wisdom, and to the best of my knowledge I will try to communicate that with you and also gain from the knowledge myself. So this is a reading out aloud. I'm not just saying I have it all and I'm just going to tell you. No. This is both for you and I together, and I may be half a step ahead, I don't know, but this is what we're going to follow. So with that, I close today's class, and we will hopefully see you next week. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Let's see if you have any questions. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. All right. Good to have you all in this. Class, and looking to see if there's any questions about today's class. So far, I don't see anything. I'm going to be sending an email to all the classes in the next day or so that has several topics in it that have been accumulating. But one of the topics that I would just mention, which just pertains to the Tuesday class, is that we will not have a class on the US election day, which is a Tuesday, which is November 3rd. Because I think last time, as you know, and many of you may remember this, and I think we were doing Dakshinamurti Stotram 4 years ago. Maybe something else, I'm not sure, in Milpitas. And we decided to continue with our Tuesday night class on the election day. And I was thinking whether we should have it or not, and it looked like it was pretty obvious that Hillary Clinton was going to win, and Trump had no chance. When we finished the class on coming back, I was in a shock, like most of you are, I'm sure, that he won. And so this time, I think for any moral support of the party that I'm at least fond of, which is the Democratic Party, we will just follow the votes in the evening. And so if you don't mind, we will not have a class on November 3rd. And I have a lot of other topics that I'm going to be writing to you about. So please look for an email from me in the last few days. Yeah, so Kuldeep, you're right. The class heading says it's the start of verse 9. And so it is the verse 9. So the first one was Sahasra Shirsha. The second one was Purusha Eva Idagum Sarvam. The third one was Etavanasya Mahima. The fourth was Tripat Asya Mritam Divihi. Number 5 was Tasmat Virada Jayata. Then number 6 was Tasmat Yagyat Sarvahutaha Sambhritam Prishadajyam. Number 7 was Tasmat Yagyat Sarvahutaha Riches Samani, etc. Number 8 was Tasmad Ashva Ajayanta. And number 9 now is going backwards to one, as I mentioned before, it follows a different sequence. Tam Yagyan Barhishi Praukshan. So this is number 9. Yeah. It's interesting that, just one comment, and I'll see if you have any other questions, then we are done. You know, it's what I find is that sometimes when you study Vedanta, the same concepts are presented in the various Upanishads with words that are very consistent but also similar looking. And so, for example, Viveka between Atma and Anatma, Atma Satyam and Atma Mithya, etc., etc. These words we become familiar with, and unless they are presented in the right way, we become somewhat lazy about understanding them. Oh no, this one I have heard, so there's nothing new. Let me go on to the next one. This is the kind of feeling that we get. And what I find in Swami Maheshananji's treatment of the Vedas, with all of his various books, you saw a sample of that in this 6 classes that I took, which says Vaktitva ka Vikas, and that means the flowering of the humanness. That the same topic is presented in a slightly different language, and in doing that you do not go to sleep. You are trying to understand how this is the case. I find the same thing in Purusha Suktam. And the more I read it in depth, what I find is that the Purusha Suktam is Vedanta. Totally Vedanta. There's absolutely nothing else on it. The only thing that is different is that there is a dimension to society. How one should have a structure of living in a society where the Vedantic principles become meaningful to us. That's the only difference. It's just another dimension to it. But basically it is Vedanta. Even the verse number 9, as we will see on this sacrifice. What do you mean by a sacrifice? It looks like a sacrifice. You're cutting the head off of something. And then the way it is presented, it says it will tie down to what our understanding of Atma and Anatma is. So what I'm saying is that it's very refreshing to be given a treatment of our familiar Vedantic principles, but in a form that elicits our thinking. We don't go to sleep. Oh yeah, I've heard this before. It's something new. This is what I really admire about Swami Maheshananji, and I'm so devoted to his way of explaining. Sometimes a little difficult to us grasp, but in the end very joyful. And so as we will see, we may not all come together in the next verse, but slowly you will see that the same vision, that Atma Satyam Jagan Mithya, Atma Brahma Evi, is there, but presented in a way which is very interesting. So I just wanted to present that. All right, I don't see any other questions, so I will say goodbye to you, and hopefully we will see you next week. Om.